When do we pull the warm season crops out of the polytunnel? That's a question I struggle with every year. We are growing a range of high-value fruiting crops that can only really produce well during the warmer parts of the season, and all of them are tender plants that will not survive a frost, so there's a limited season for them even in the polytunnels. With the courgette plants outside, we really don't need the bed for anything else until next spring, so we will leave these plants to continue to produce a small amount for as long as they can, probably until the first frost kills them. And in one of the polytunnels, I want to leave the courgette, cucumber, and bean plants to grow for as long as possible in the large grow bags, more to see how they respond to the changing season. But in the other large polytunnel, we need to clear out some of the warm season plants so that we can plant in the late season and overwintering crops while there's still a chance for decent growth before the winter. And this is where some of the harder decisions need to be made. Many of the aubergine plants are looking quite healthy, but very few fruit are currently developing, and we're unlikely to get much more from these heat-loving plants with the weather cooling down so much. So I think it's better to pull them out as soon as possible and plant in a range of salad and cool season crops that will actually produce something to eat into late autumn, over winter, and possibly into early spring. We just harvested a lot of green and underripe peppers from the pepper plants, but there's still a fair amount of fruit developing, so we might leave these plants to continue to grow for a few weeks before replacing them with more overwintering crops. With the 3 beds of tomato plants, it's not so clear what to do. The middle bed with larger varieties of tomatoes will probably be the first to go, as the plants are not in great shape and are unlikely to produce much more, so that will open up another bed for planting right away. But the other 2 beds of tomato plants are still producing smaller tomatoes, so we will probably leave them for a while longer, hoping that they continue to produce tomatoes for another month or so. But the longer we leave these plants in the ground, the more likely we will lose the opportunity to grow even more cold-tolerant plants that will feed ourselves over the winter and into the early spring. And these older plants needed a fair amount of work pruning the old growth, removing diseased leaves, and to let more sunlight in, which is a fair amount of effort for diminishing returns. It might have been better to take the easier option to clear all of these summer crops out of the polytunnel at once, now that the weather started to cool down, to completely clear the polytunnel, clean it all up, and prepare all the beds for the overwintering planting. But it is hard to give up the possibility of even more tomatoes, even though the late season fruit are never as good as those ripened in the warmth of the summer.